we've had theater, and a whole bunch of other things that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but it's quite a magnificent space. We have a workshop where we do a lot of cultural trainings with people. And we also have a library and archives, which is the home to all historical documents in USG. Oops, excuse me. So, as I said, we have a library and archives team. We have an education and programming team to deliver workshops. We have our material collections team, a research team. We do huge gatherings. We have an archaeology department as well, and they are incredibly busy. I'll talk about them in a minute, but very impressive work that they do. And we do a lot of arts with people as well. We have a space where we have artists come in and do artists in residency programs and teach different things to community members. So our library and archives is a documentation and research center. As I mentioned, it's home to all the historical documents, tapes, cassettes, videos. We have 8 tracks that are about focused on USG. So we have agreements with the government, recordings of elders, all sorts of different things in our archives. But we're a repository for all future documents and research. So part of our work in research is any researcher who does come in and works with us has to leave their work with us at the end of the day, so that others who come along may want to access their research later on. We have a digitization component, and that's a big focus of our work right now. We have 2 people working solely on digitizing our entire archives. Because it is such a big area, it is difficult for community members to access historical documents and, even cassettes with elders on them. It may be a grandfather and grandmother who's speaking, and to have to travel to Ujibwe from, say, Wamingji or Shusasvili, that takes about 7 or 8 hours. And the roads aren't always great. Some of them are gravel. So it's not only dangerous, but it's time consuming as well. So we're digitizing a lot of our archives right now so that we can make it accessible to community members without them having to leave their own community. Our library collection is quite interesting, as it is entirely on Indigenous topics. A lot of people kind of come in and joke, oh, you don't have any Stephen King books? Well, we don't actually. It's all related to Cree history or Indigenous history and topics. So it's quite a nice library. Actually, there's some great books in there. And our librarian is a wonderful lady. She's got this great system, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But she's just a wonderful person who is like a database in herself of where all these books are. It's I kind of enjoy quizzing her and finding out exactly where certain books are in our library, and she can tell me within minutes. It's great. So one of the big successes that we have is our online database. And as I said, it really as a need for community members to access their history and their historical documents without leaving their own communities. And I think that's so important to be able to serve the communities that way. We have the Brian Deere classification system, and this is the system that Annie has put into place. And it's based on topics. It's not like the Dewey Decimal System where that was really restrictive in how we added books to our classification system. This is more like of a natural system that allows a greater flexibility of where books would be classified and where they would be placed on our shelves and how they would be ordered. But she's become such an expert in this that she's been asked to assist numerous libraries across the country to implement the system. In terms of education, we've been doing a lot of outreach and distance education with schools. And the reason for that, again, is it's just very difficult to travel to see us. As we serve different communities, there's one that can only fly to us, and that's really expensive and costly, so it doesn't always happen. So we've been putting lessons, virtual workshops together to help serve the communities in a way that allows people to remain in their own community. We've done some workshops with traditional skills. The latest one being painted caribou coats. And that one was quite interesting because we've been learning about the designs and the natural paints that were used. And we've been trying to pass that on to community members today. So this is something that was done over 300 years ago. So we're relearning those crafts in order to pass them on to future generations. Some of our school programs have been quite successful. We've had students from universities in the United States come and spend a few days with us, primary schools from all around the area. We've even had a couple of high schools come from Atlanta, Georgia, and another one from Saskatchewan. So quite the far-reaching visits, which has been really, really quite exciting over the past 10 years. In terms of training, we help communities preserve their own collections. So we've had a lot of conservation and collections workshops, as well as collection management workshops, and just to help communities be able to preserve their own history. We've delivered archive workshops, and we have another one coming up in late February with the community of Shasasebe. And we've also done a lot of training sessions with artists. In terms of collections, we have right now 2 exhibits. We have a permanent exhibit and a traveling exhibit that just before COVID kind of wrapped up its tour. The permanent exhibit has been in place for about 10 years, and we're currently doing some updates to provide a new experience for visitors. Our traveling exhibit, Footprints, it went to all the communities, and it was the first time a museum type exhibit went to communities in the area. It then went to Amos, Val-d'Or, and later at the Canadian Museum of History. And it was really well received. It actually won an award from the Governor General. So we won the Governor General's History Award for that, which was, it took a while to develop this exhibit, but it was quite impressive when it was done. And so it's just, it was nice to receive that as a show of all our hard work. We care for a lot of historical objects in the area. And lately, 2 huge successes this past year actually have been the return of the gunner hood. This hood, and I'm really, again, sorry that my partner Trifona wasn't here, or is not here tonight. She's part of the gunner family. And so this hood that we found in Montreal at the Lachine Museum was actually her great-great-great-grandmother's. And so we were able to negotiate with the city of Montreal and have it transferred to us on a permanent basis. We also were able to transfer the title of a caribou jacket that was in Bristol, England for a number of years that had ended up over in England through the fur trade. And they decided after numerous conversations to give it back to us. And so that just arrived this past fall. In terms of gatherings, we host quite a few events. Some that have stood out. We had a huge language symposium, and so we invited people from all over the area to help discuss an effort to help promote the use of Cree language in the communities to ensure that it would never be in danger. So that was a really big symposium that we held. We've had movie premieres. The Odiak, which is a canoe that was taken from Mexico all the way down to New York City in 1990 to protest the Great Whale Project from Hydro-Quebec. We've had fiddle dances in our space. We've had meetings, all sorts of meetings, government consultations. A few years ago, the government of Quebec had consultations on culture, and we held one of those. We had some performances as well. We had theater, and the Montreal Symphony Orchestra actually played in our building. And we've also been the site of a number of film films being shot and TV series. So that's always been fun to be a part of. So in terms of archaeology, this is, I think, one of the most exciting aspects of the work that we do. We're trying to protect and recognize historical and heritage sites in the communities and around the communities and in the area. We're trying to ensure that historical knowledge is accessible by communities. So we do a lot of reports on community work, and we share it with communities after it's done. We put together these big displays and work to take it back to communities so that they can see what was found and how what the story might be describing through these objects. But we are really community focused, and we have a ton of digs. We bring in people from the communities. We talk with elders to find out where these sites are, and we work with communities to do these digs and learn more with them, not for them, but with them. And one thing that we're working on right now is a 257 square kilometer survey between Matagami and the community of Waskaganish. So that's a huge project that's going to take a long time to complete, but it's going to be quite interesting, I think. In terms of arts, again, as I mentioned before, we do have a lot of artists in residency programs. And this picture here is a caribou coat that I was mentioning earlier. And we've been really doing a lot of research on caribou jackets. We've taken a group of elders and artists to different museums across Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto to look at these caribou jackets and to try and gain some more information around the designs that were on these jackets. And from there, we started learning about the natural paints that were used. And we then took all of that information, went to all the communities and taught people about what we learned, about the patterns, about the techniques in painting and the techniques behind making the paint. So as I said, some major accomplishments. Mind's Eye theatrical production. In 2015, we put on a big play. There was a book written by this lady, Emily Masty in Wapmextu. She had been compiling stories for 30 some odd years. She was talking to elders and getting traditional stories, and she recorded them and wrote them down and put this book together. And we then turned it into a play. And it was the first time that stories were told in this format through a theatrical production. So we toured it to all the communities, and it was really quite well received. In fact, a lot of people had been calling for the past 5-6 years saying, are you going to do it again? I missed it the first time. I'd love to see it. So from that point, we decided we put it into a film, and we just finished shooting it last December. So that should be ready for viewing, hopefully sometime within the next month or two. In terms of the gunner hood, that was something that we just we reunited the gunner family with the beaded hood in 2016 after we discovered where it was. We brought the hood up, took it to the community of Istchee, and it was just kind of like a wow factor. The family was like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm meeting my great grandmother all over again." It was really quite a powerful moment, and that's kind of what propelled us into getting the gunner hood returned this past year. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of storage and conservation training with the communities. We developed tourist kits, which is great. So it helps us add to our programming capabilities. Footprints, the language session. We were in recent collaboration with the University of Aberdeen in Scotland in exhibition development in 2018. They were creating this exhibit on fiddle dancing and fiddle music, and from the fur trade, a lot of Scots came over as part of the fur trade, and they were working for the Hudson Bay Company, and of course they brought their fiddles. And it's quite interesting that what was brought over in terms of music that way really stayed and resonated with a lot of people. So fiddle music is quite alive and well. So it was a neat collaboration between the University of Aberdeen and us. And hopefully after COVID, we can get that exhibit over here and start touring it around the communities. In 2018, we hosted the Montreal Symphony Orchestra, which was a really neat experience. I have to say it was probably one of the neatest experiences that we've had, just because of the logistics around it. But the night that the performance happened, or I should say the afternoon, of all times, there was this huge storm. It felt like hurricane-like winds outside, and all the power got knocked out. And so everyone was just kind of scrambling for about 2 hours to try and figure out how we were going to get the power back on, how we could get this performance going. And so the whole community really kind of came together. People were donating generators, people had lamps, people had a whole bunch of different flashlights, and we hung them up around the building to create some light and put on this show. So it went off, and actually the ambiance was really quite nice because of the dark, but all the low light as well. So it was really quite a day to remember, but just really quite amazing how everyone came together to make it happen. We've done archaeology programs with schools where we've invited schools to come out and dig with us, which has been really quite interesting because in the area, a lot of kids live in the communities, but there's some kids that live in Chibougamau as well and go to the school there. So that was the school that we worked with, and for them to get a cultural experience like this that they wouldn't normally get was, I think, really quite a rewarding part of that archaeological program that we did in 2018. As I mentioned before, the Governor General's Award, the footprints, those were some big events for us. Like a lot of hard work went into that from a lot of different people, but it was just really nice to be able to display that at the Canadian Museum of History. And the other thing that we just sort of finished up was our new website. We started in 2020. We just officially launched it not too long ago. But our website, we understand that in response to COVID, it's very difficult for people to come see us, but not just because of COVID, but because of our geographic location. So we developed a whole new website to try and show people what we're capable of and what we offer from the comfort of your own home. And one of those neat little things is a virtual reality visit. So I'm just gonna take you through that for a second, because it's, as I say, something that we're quite proud of. But if you did come and visit us, or if you did come and visit our website, you can just kind of click on here. And what's kind of nice is I can take you through what our building actually does look like from the outside. When you can kind of see pictures, but when you actually see it from the outside, and how it's, as I say, such a large, imposing building, it really is. So what is quite neat about this is, it is fully, you can walk anywhere in the building as if you were there, turn around and see what we have to offer. When I said this is our Billy Diamond Hall, this is the hall named after him, and we've had all sorts of performances in here. It's designed specifically for that, which is, I think, one of the great things. It just adds, the acoustics add so much value to any sort of performance in there. As I was saying, when the symphony orchestra was playing in there, it just sounded incredible. So yeah, if you do get some time to go see it, I would please suggest, do take the time to go in. I'm just going to give you a quick glimpse into what our exhibition space might look like, or looks like, and if you did want to come and see. This is our main exhibition space, and so we have all sorts of things in there. We have archaeology components in there that you can take a look at, and some of them, some of the things on display are dated 5,000 years ago. So it's pretty impressive. Different snowshoes, different styles of snowshoes. That's really quite important because each snowshoe has a different purpose. You're gonna have to come visit us for real to find out why. We do have the Northern Quebec Agreement on display as well, so that's quite the accomplishment in terms of land claims, settlements, and agreements with governments on behalf of Indigenous peoples. This is the Odiak that I had mentioned earlier that went from Wapmextu all the way down to New York City. It started on ice, it was pulled by dog sled, but as soon as the waters opened up, people did paddle, people were talking and stopping and talking with anyone that would listen. And that was really something that was instrumental in stopping the Great Whale Project. So yeah, quite a few different things on display. So I do hope that you take a moment to look at some point, but also eventually come and visit as well. And with that, I've been talking on Zoom all day today. I think this is like hour number 8, if I'm not mistaken. So my mouth is a little bit dry. I've been drinking as much water as I possibly can, but I would like to open it up to any questions or comments or things that you might be interested in.
Rob, thank you. That was a marvelous presentation. And thank you so much for taking us on a bit of the virtual tour. I've been to the website. It really is wonderful. And so I encourage everybody that hasn't seen the site to go, because it's really excellent. And so is the YouTube channel that you have. With you can see demonstrations and people talking, and so it's really quite marvelous. Thank you so much. I mean, the list that you show of all the accomplishments is really impressive, and I'm just so delighted that you've been here with us today. And I know I won't hog any more of the time because I'm sure that people do have questions, and you can turn your cameras back on. That's okay, eh, Glenn? So we can create a bit of a community. And
of course. Yeah, so to use the, if you want to ask a question, the easiest thing to do, you may have noticed if you try to unmute yourself, you can't, and that's intentional. I can unmute you for you. So if you have a question, type it in the chat box. Remember, that's down at the bottom of the Zoom window, or tap on your mobile screen and you can probably find your chat box. You can either just say, I have a question, and then we'll queue you up and I'll unmute you. Or you can write your question and we'll ask it on your behalf. Also, for people on Facebook, it's jumping back and forth between Zoom and Facebook is, a bit tricky, but I will do my best to hop over there and see if there's any questions on Facebook. We also have, we're live streaming on YouTube now as well. So if anyone's watching on YouTube, I will also try to get over there. I just want to say, reminder, once again, this is being recorded and broadcast. So this is the, if you're ever worried about your image appearing in a broadcast, this is where it might happen. So if you're not comfortable with that, just hop onto our Facebook page. We're live there as well. Otherwise, stay on with us, and looking forward to the Q&A.
Well, maybe I can start off, Rob. I could ask you a million questions, but I'm really quite interested in being a former curator of the repatriation efforts that you've gone through. And obtaining the jacket from Bristol, England, and how you discovered it was there, or did they contact you? And do you have a program to look for objects, or how is it that you're finding objects to come back to the center?
Okay, well, the first one was the Gunner Hood, and that was by chance. Actually, we were just flipping through some catalogs from different museums. And one of the ladies that was working with us at the time said, oh, that's a very interesting name. Why is it called the Gunner Hood? And that just started off a whole bunch of different questions. And then from there, we were talking to different people, and it became an experience. And like, oh, I do remember my grandmother or my great grandmother talking about a hood like this. And so all those questions kind of asked a few more questions and a series of questions, and then it opened up the conversation that it was in fact from the community of Mississippi. And so that was a very interesting one. The Bristol Jacket, we were in contact with someone from there. They were putting together an exhibit, and they were asking for our advice on labels and I think they have 3 jackets in their collection. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, the conversation was around magic, and that's how they wanted to display the jackets. Now, the jackets aren't magical in any way. It's a very spiritual type connection with hunting and animals. And so the jackets, they're painted on people typically dressed up for the hunt. They wore their best clothes to attract the spirit of the animal. And so we went through this conversation with them and said, it may not be appropriate to talk about magic in the same context. It's more of a spiritual thing. And so these kind of discussions grew and grew into like, I think maybe we're probably the best place to have this jacket. And they couldn't help but agree with that. So, but in terms of programs that we are doing, we do have a program right now that we're working on, trying to just research where objects may or may not, or like where they may be, either in private collections, in archives, and in museums around the world, just so we at least know. And then from that point, we can start figuring out what type of things we want to have discussions around.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, because I know back in the 80s, there was a great reluctance to let First Nations people take back their objects. And so many objects were displayed incorrectly and without understanding what they were dealing with, sacred objects and family objects and that sort of thing. So hopefully we've come a little way, and this is a good sign if the center is getting objects back, and perhaps museums will contact you, which would be really nice.
Oh, wouldn't that be so great?
Yeah, that would be. I have a question.
Maybe you got it, Heather. I think. Okay. Well, I'll ask it for Joseph Graham, who's here with us on Zoom. He was asking. He was curious about the laminated arches on the building. Were those also made of black spruce, local black spruce?
Yeah, all the wood in the building comes from the area, which is quite incredible when you think about it. Like, it is such a massive structure, but I do remember these beams being transported on a truck, and they're so large that they had to bring one at a time. So it's amazing. It's about 80 kilometers from where they're manufactured to our site. So yeah, you can just imagine like these huge structures. I was seeing them come in, and it's like, how does it not fall off the truck, for one? But they get it here safely and then unload it. But yeah, definitely all from the area.
He also had another question. Seems like he's interested in visiting, and he's saying, how could we make a family visit? What would be involved in getting in staying in the area for a visit, for example?
Okay, well, there's a lot of different options to stay there. I would recommend summer. It's a lot more scenic. Like, we're on a lake, and it's quite a shallow lake as well, so it's great swimming for kids. But you can canoe and you can kayak on there as well, so it's quite nice. In terms of staying, there is a hotel in the community, which is it's actually like a really, really nice hotel. It was just renovated a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, just before COVID. But it's beautiful. There's a restaurant there. And then if you wanted to as well, like Istchee is close by, Chibougamau and Chappé are both close by, and they have some nice hotels as well. So there's a lot to do. There's some other tourist attractions in the area. There is Istchee Corporation, which is like an outdoor wildlife reserve. And they have some great places to stay in the summer, where you can actually have like a floating hotel type stay on the lake, which is pretty cool.
Right. And Claudie Hebert, she said any translation you can do into French would be loved by the French communities. I'm not sure how much of your programming or your interpretation is translated, but always a challenge.
Our website is available in French. There's we've done a lot of work on that. In terms of programming, we do have a lot of people on site that are available to speak in French. And just as a result of COVID too, we haven't been able to offer a lot of tours and in-person tours, which is really like a great experience. So we're in the development of audio guides right now, where you can have that similar experience. It's nothing compares to the real deal, but having that similar experience, and that will be available in English, French, and Cree.
Wonderful.
I have another question for you, Rob. You mentioned something about the language projects going on, and I wondered if you could expand a little bit about that.
Sure. One we're working on right now is kind of interesting. It's for people that are bird lovers. And I mean, it is a huge, huge area. There's a lot of trees, a lot of nature to explore. So we're actually working on a field guide, a bird field guide. And it's all going to be in Cree.
So do you have elders teaching students? Is there language workshops, that sort of thing?
We do, yeah. We had, there's this wonderful man. I hope he stays around forever, but his name is Thomas Kuhn. He's getting older, and he comes in and talks to kids all the time. And it's so wonderful because he gives like this, you ask them to come in and say like, could you talk for like maybe 30 minutes to this class? They're, secondary 1 students, and they want to learn about fishnets. And he's like, sure, no problem. And he has like 100 props that I'll bring with him, and he's say half an hour. That means like, okay, so I've got half an hour to start with, right? I could go for the rest of the day. So yes, he's this wonderful man, and we do all sorts of programs like that when we can.
And your exhibit called Footprints, what was that about exactly? That sounds very interesting.
That was about walking. Actually, walking is a huge tradition in Cree society. It's, as I showed the snowshoes, there's one pair of snowshoes that's on display that would be typically used for long distance travel. And I don't know if you remember in 2016 maybe, or even 2015, the journey of Eeyou, where a couple kids, they're maybe 15, 16 years old, they're in Wapmextu, and is part of the Idle No More movement, maybe 2014. And what they did is they walked from Wapmextu to Ottawa to be part of those protests. And that's over 1,600 kilometers.
Wow.
Yes. So,
yeah.
People did travel, and then like walking is a huge thing. There's a lot of ceremonies around walking. There's the first snowshoe walk, where children around 5 years old typically go out for a walk and kind of, learn that tradition. There's a walking out ceremony where kids touch the ground for the first time and meet the animals and, sort of assume their roles in society. So there's a lot of neat things around walking. And so that's what it was about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How are we doing with questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I have one. Speaking of mobility, I almost just need to hear it again. You talked about that canoe that was taken to New York. What was the route that they took? I'm so curious.
I wish I knew the exact route. I'm sure people would like to travel that as well, but they started in Wapmextu, which is the northernmost community. So they did obviously go south. But they ended up, I think, close to Ganawagi, down into Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, and they definitely went through Lake Champlain.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was neat because it was, at the time, it was an election year in the United States, and so Vermont being like a very green-focused state. The talk about around this project was that it was going to like have huge environmental impacts on the community, on the area, on animals. And so it was great. It was great that they were talking about this, because it would. But it got the population, the people of Vermont saying, you know what? And the reason why they're talking, because Hydro-Quebec was going to sell it to these states, right? The energy to these states. And so they said, look, if you start buying this to the government, they said this to the government of the people, if you start buying this, we won't be voting you in. So that's one of the reasons why it kind of got shelved. They were really strategic in how they presented the argument and who they spoke to get that shelved.
Really innovative. I was wondering if there's any sort of, I guess, exchange of ideas, best practices with other Indigenous organizations in Canada, especially ones doing things like you're doing involving museums and intangible cultural heritage. Do you guys, or maybe you get requests from other people looking for, how do we set up this sort of program?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, Annie, our librarian, is teaching institutions across the country how to set up the Brian Deere classification system for their libraries. We get calls about that. We're working with some other museums in the province right now, some Indigenous museums, to try and create and establish a network of Indigenous museums, so that when people do go to one, they hear about another one and hopefully get to see a whole bunch of different cultures on their trip. So yeah, we are establishing links and trying to grow our network as much as we can.
Yeah, that's very cool, because networking is what it's all about, and that's how we found you, is just looking and found the center, and what a marvelous surprise that was. So, and I wondered if Glenn's ears picked up when you were talking about fiddle music, because Glenn is our resident musician for sure, and so the tradition of fiddle music happens in the community itself right now. Yeah.
Oh yes. Former Grand Chief Matthew Mukash is a huge fiddle player, and he often goes to just he's out and about, and if he's at some sort of event, people will often ask him to play. It's impromptu, but it's really quite interesting too, because there's a very personal style that people have in terms of fiddle music. So if you were to take someone from, say, Scotland, or who's been trained very well, and it's very formal, people have their own style and own little variations on songs, and it takes on a whole new life.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry, Heather.
No, I was going to say, go. You're the one that knows the music.
Well, I can't help but mention, early on, I play fiddle, and there was a wonderful documentary made by the NFB in the 70s. I think it's called Cree Fiddles. I could be wrong, but they took some fiddlers from the Orkney Islands off the coast of Scotland, and they brought them to the Cree territory, and they had this exchange, and they showed which music they had in common, which they knew a lot of the same tunes, of course, but like you say, played in a different style over the years, but a very vibrant scene. I was lucky to co-host a jam session downtown Montreal on Bishop Street, and every once in a while, because there's often Cree people flying into the city, someone would stop in from the Cree communities with a fiddle, and it was always a real treat, to get them to play. We know a lot of the same tunes, we just played them differently. It's so cool to jam together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that film is great. I know which one you're talking about. I think it's The Fiddlers of James Bay, or
that's the one.
Yeah,
that's it. There's another question I saw on Facebook here. Let me see if I can pull this up. It's from Roberta Billingsley out in New Carlisle on the Gaspé Coast. She's saying she works as the Senior Economic Development Officer for Geskapegiag First Nation. That's the Mi'kmaq community there. Yep. And we are trying very hard to find support to develop our very, very small interpretation center. You mentioned an audio tour. May I ask what steps were taken to get this going?
Okay, so we've been looking at an audio guide for a while. They are quite expensive, the traditional ones. They get these big handheld devices, and they kind of are awkward, and especially now with COVID, everyone has to clean everything. So we definitely shied away from that route. And what we started looking at is this app that, everyone has a cell phone. It's kind of augmented reality. So you just kind of hold your own phone. We have Wi-Fi in our institute, so you just download it, and it's called Guidego. And a lot of museums do actually use it. It creates a little floor plan and map. So you just kind of go around and pinpoint spots. And as you walk, a little trail will appear on your phone. Things will pop up and be able to speak to you on that. So it's pretty changeable as well. It's once you put it in there, it doesn't mean it's set there forever. You can go in and easily change everything about it. So if you want to add new content, or totally configure how your panels would be, or if a walking path, no problem. It's quite simple, quite easy, and in general, a lot more affordable than the traditional type.
I have to check that out. Once upon a time, I developed an audio tour app using GPS, but the platform that did it is no longer supported for their security issues with the latest Android update. I can't remember why, but yes, there's I think that's always a great way to interpret heritage, especially the storytelling aspect of it. It's such a powerful medium.
I agree. It's easy though. That's what I like about it. I'm just going to find the website here, and I'll put it in the chat as well, if that's okay.
Oh, please do. We'd love
Yeah.
that. It's always great to see the, obviously people on Facebook might not be able to see this, but on Zoom, there's often messages flying back and forth and people posting links. And this is just a great way to share information and what's out there and get other people inspired, like Roberta over there in New Carlisle.
Well, I hope it helps. I mean, it's not the only option, but it is an option. And that's the idea behind it. It's very
I'm
good.
just so impressed with how you have these wonderful digital platforms, probably because you're such a huge distance to navigate. And so I wondered if COVID threw you for a loop, or were you already really prepared for connecting with people before COVID?
We had always been talking about how can we do more, and I think that's kind of one of the things that one of the ways that we operate is what else can we do? It's kind of dangerous, but exciting at the same time. It's nice to dream about all these things. But so we had been talking about our website. Our first website was 10 years old or so, and had been designed, and like at the time it was fantastic. You could pick up objects and rotate them like 360 degrees, and like 10 years ago, wow, but now it's, come on. So we've been trying to figure that out. And so, yeah, we were getting prepared. And I think when COVID actually hit, we said, okay, we really need to act now. And I think that just kind of pushed us over the edge to make sure that everything was ready to be able to deal with that.
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said dreaming, because that's the theme of our series this year is dreaming big. And you really have taken the dreams and made them a reality, and it's just marvelous. I don't know if there are any more questions anybody has to ask. I don't see any more either, so I think we'll bring our evening to a close, Rob. And I just want to thank you so much for taking us up to Aanischaaukamikw Cultural Institute. I think it's been wonderful to visit digitally and see the work that you're doing, the accomplishments that you've done. It would be wonderful if we could all go there one day, but I encourage everyone who hasn't seen the website to really go take a few minutes, take some time there and visit the center. It's the heart of the Cree land, and you're doing such wonderful work in protecting the heritage and culture, language, art of the people. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us this evening. It's been marvelous. Yeah, well, indeed.
Thank you so much. I'm just glad everyone was interested in this, and I'm really happy to be here. And I do hope that if anyone does get the chance to come visit, please stop by, say hi, and we're happy to have you, and we'll gladly show you around.
That's excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you to all of you who joined us today. Our next presentation is on Sunday, this coming up, February 13th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we're going to meet Yana Valasek and Anne-Marie Adams from the Pettis Library in Knowlton, Quebec, for their talk called Heritage of the Pettis Memorial Library, Past, Present, and Future. And they have a game-changing project in the works to tell us about. So that's exciting. And you can find our whole speaker lineup on our Heritage Talks Facebook page and on our website at quan.org. And from there, you can pre-register to be on Zoom and join the audience like this evening. Or you can join us on Facebook Live as well. So next Sunday at 1. Thank you always to our friend Glenn in Master Control for keeping us all on track. And until next time, thank you again, Rob, and thank you to all of you, and good night.